What is postmodernism? Well, going by the Merriam-Webster dictionary, it is defined as relating to various movements in reaction to modernism that are typically characterized by ironic self-reference and absurdity. Or, in the simpler words of Moe from The Simpsons,
Yeah, all right. Weird for the sake of weird.
The best way to discuss and define postmodernism is to analyze a specific example. So today I'm going to be talking about Community, a sitcom created by Dan Harmon, which ran on NBC from 2009 to 2014, before airing its sixth and final season on Yahoo Screen, RIP, in 2015. While it struggled with ratings throughout its original run, Community has since amassed a dedicated cult following, and is frequently cited as a prime example of postmodern art. Community begins as a fairly conventional, down-to-earth sitcom. Its setting is a low-rent community college called Greendale, and its central ensemble is comprised of 7 mismatched characters: disbarred lawyer Jeff, neurodivergent film student Abed, wannabe activist Britta, former high school athlete Troy, single mother Shirley, compulsive overachiever Annie, and a rich old asshole with a knack for making everybody around him uncomfortable named Pierce. The early storylines are more or less what one would expect from a sitcom set in a community college. They mainly focus on the characters attempting to pass their classes while dealing with personal relationships in between. But towards the end of the first season came 2 episodes that would effectively provide the mission statement for the kind of show that Community would ultimately become. Those episodes are Contemporary American Poultry and Modern Warfare. Both of these episodes are pastiches of a particular film genre. In Contemporary American Poultry, the study group come up with a plan to skim the coveted chicken fingers in the school's cafeteria, a scheme that eventually spirals into a much larger operation, turning the episode into a parody of classic mob movies, specifically Goodfellas and Casino. All the recognizable hallmarks are there. The narration by the lead character.
That was it. It was that simple. At that moment, we stopped being a family and started being a family. In italics.
The needle drops playing over montages of characters running their operation, and freeze frames.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be in a mafia movie.
The episode follows the same essential structure as the movies that it imitates. Characters get involved in a shady or illegal activity, increase their influence in the local social hierarchy, and enjoy indulging in the extravagant benefits that come as a result of their criminal enterprise, before they inevitably fly too close to the sun and lose everything that they'd gained. The key difference, of course, is that the criminal enterprise in question here doesn't revolve around money laundering or drug dealing, but rather cafeteria chicken fingers. Nonetheless, the characters treat it with as much seriousness as, say, the casino business from Martin Scorsese's Casino. Meanwhile, Modern Warfare sees the college organize a school-wide paintball tournament with a much sought-after prize for the victor. The promise of this prize leads to the tournament escalating into a full-scale war, with the episode following the typical structure of a zombie apocalypse movie. Characters split into factions and treat the tournament as a serious matter of life and death, which adds to the comic value when they get dramatically shot, only to just shrug it off and go home.
I'm going home, Britta.
I know, Shirley, I know.
No, seriously, I'm going home. Can you help me out?
Oh, yeah, sure.
This episode became hugely popular among fans, and is now looked back on as a key turning point in Community's run. From the second season onwards, Community only continues to embrace this style. Many episodes from this point on are once again homages to a different film genre, with the targets ranging from Rankin Bass Christmas specials to Ken Burns Vietnam documentaries. The world it takes place in goes from a fairly grounded school setting to something much more surreal and absurdist. In the zany reality of Community, even the most seemingly mundane situations quickly take a turn for the bizarre. One of the overarching storylines of the third season sees Troy being pressured into enrolling in Greendale's air conditioning repair school, which is portrayed as a cultish organization that requires its recruits to forsake their loved ones in order to dedicate their lives to air conditioning repair. This strangest of storylines is treated with straight-faced matter-of-factness by the characters in the show, with Troy hardly seeming fazed at all by the weirdness of the scenario. Most sitcoms have occasional concept episodes which break from the show's usual formula in order to do something more experimental or fun, such as the musical episode of Scrubs or the backwards episode of Seinfeld. But in Community, almost every episode is a concept episode. But the single most postmodern element of Community is the character of Abed. Displaying a near encyclopedic knowledge of pop culture, Abed struggles to relate to people in conventional ways and instead copes by viewing the events of his life through the lens of film and television tropes.
Abed, why are you mining my life for classic sitcom scenarios?
I guess I'm just excited about the new year, looking for ways to improve things. I'm hoping we can move away from the soapy relationshipy stuff and into bigger, fast-paced, self-contained escapades.
This makes him the vessel for many of the show's most meta jokes. as he is well aware of how television narratives are structured and won't hesitate to draw parallels between what he observes around him and the tropes that he knows so well. In the pilot, which largely focuses on the main group's personalities clashing during their first study session together, he repeatedly draws parallels with the episode's clear inspiration, The Breakfast Club. When it becomes clear that he and his friends are going to spend an entire episode in a single room, he's quick to point out that they're in a bottle episode. Indeed, much of Community's humor is built on the premise that its entire audience is as pop culture literate as Abed is.
You know, I thought you were like Bill Murray in any of his films, but you're more like Michael Douglas in any of his films.
Dan Harmon likes to use absurd humor to explore deceptively philosophical or existential ideas, and this is most often apparent in the Abed-centric episodes of Community. Episodes such as Abed's Uncontrollable Christmas and Virtual Systems Analysis put us directly inside his head, showing us how his media-obsessed brain perceives the world and copes with the frighteningly unstructured nature of real life. Writing for Medium, Kai-Ming Chow argued that the high-concept episodes are not just self-indulgent references, but a narrative device used to illustrate the overall theme of the episode and externalize the internal conflict within these characters. Finally, Community works so well as a postmodern sitcom because in many ways it's a deconstruction of the sitcom itself. Its earliest episodes appear to set up a classic will they won't they dynamic between Jeff and Britta, in the vein of Sam and Diane or Ross and Rachel, but they ultimately end up as platonic friends, with Jeff's primary love interest instead turning out to be Annie, despite them not seeming like an obvious match at first glance. Like many sitcoms, there's one episode that acts as a clip show, except none of the clips depict any events that actually occurred on screen in previous episodes. In fact, the purpose of a clip show is usually to cut costs, but this episode was actually the most expensive of that season. Writing for The Atlantic, Hampton Stevens argued that Community isn't actually a sitcom, not any more than The Onion is an actual news-gathering organization. Community instead is a weekly satire of the sitcom genre, a spoof of pop culture in general, and an occasionally profound critique of how living in a mass media society can mess up human relationships in the real world. So, far from being weird for the sake of weird, Community goes above and beyond what is expected of a sitcom by using absurdist humor to interrogate and subvert traditional television conventions and delve into the psychological profiles of its core cast of characters in ways rarely, if ever, seen on a half-hour network comedy. All of these elements make Community a perfect example of postmodern media.
The show's gonna last 3 weeks!
6 seasons and a movie!